That was the year before. Connection between two public policies.
It's always nice to meet you.
It's all up. Yeah, that's good. And then you said the presentation?
This is the one.
Oh, this, okay, so it's all.
It looks like a presentation.
Yeah, okay. It looks familiar.
So, do you need just in case the presentation does not work. I have a researcher, senior researcher the PhD from the she didn't get into Johnson, and that's what
Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in a minute or two. We could just get our seats. So welcome to those in person and to those online. My name is Chris Cochran, and I'm the Chair of Political Science at the University of Toronto, Scarborough. We also have a public policy program, and we are very much interested in the topic of the presentation today. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the organizers of the event and our hosts, in particular the Vice Principal of Research and Innovation, Irina Creed, Professor Alison Mounts, Ariella Lukács, Tamar Musang, and Carlos Vargas Pedroza for the organization behind the scenes. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Tshilidzi Marwala, the UN Under-Secretary General and Rector of the United Nations University. He has a PhD from the University of Cambridge in Artificial Intelligence and Mechanical Engineering. He has a long list of leadership roles. Prior to his current role as Rector of the UNU, Professor Marwala served at the University of Johannesburg as Vice Chancellor and Principal, and before that as Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Internationalization, and before that as the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment. He has been a steadfast advocate in media and in many circles for the role of post-secondary education in developing and leveraging new technologies to improve lives of people around the world. He is an incredibly accomplished scholar. He has hundreds of articles and papers on applications of AI to several domains, including statistics and causal inference, economics and decision theory, flight control systems, medical imaging, finance, ecology, conservation, among many other areas, including the topic of his presentation today, artificial intelligence and public policy. Without further ado, Professor Marwala. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you very much for that introduction. I'm very, very happy to be in Toronto and to talk about this very important issue of artificial intelligence and public policy. And of course, as I speak about this topic, we are just coming from the AI summit in the UK. And there are a number of concerns that I would like to bring to the fore, which makes the role of artificial intelligence much, much more important. And also, last week, I joined the Secretary General when he announced the high-level advisory board on artificial intelligence that is going to come with a governance framework that will address the issues of AI and the impact of that in society and all other aspects of human planet and otherwise lives. I have been working for quite a great deal in the field of, for a long time in the field of artificial intelligence. I actually got into artificial intelligence in 1997 when I went to Cambridge, and as I speak about this field, I will be drawing some of the issues that I think are important for public policy. Now, just to talk about what I have seen happening, whether it is the AI summit, is the voice of the global South. Seems to be missing, and I am actually quite concerned. There is an expression in South Africa, where I come from, that there is nothing about us without us. So if all the voices are not represented, we are not going to have policies or frameworks or governance models that are actually going to take the maximization of the positive impact of this and minimization of the negative impact of this technology. Now, just to talk, artificial intelligence is really just the art. Maybe I should not use the word art, because the word art is quite a complicated word. It's basically a technique of making machines intelligent. And of course, some people would equate that to the intelligence of human beings. I always say that there are different types of intelligence. There are a certain aspect where machines are able to do things much better than human beings. And there are many instances where human beings do things better than machines. For example, many complicated big data-driven decisions are better done with machines. And if you want to console a person who has been bereaved, a human being seems to do that better than a machine. So you can see there is a role for all of us to play. So, and of course, to build this intelligence, we use mathematics and coding. And of course, when you start talking about mathematics and coding, you fall into the old problem of reductionism. You have to take a complex problem and be able to reduce it into something that can be managed by this. And of course, there are advantages and disadvantages. And there are really three different types of artificial intelligence. The prediction machines that tell you what is going to happen in the future, even though it really does not tell you what is going to happen in the future. What it does, it rearranges the information that exists today to be able to make a better sense of what is going to happen in the future. So if it is dealing with an event that has never really happened before, it does actually perform very, very poorly. The black swan, for example, But if it is dealing with a periodic event that happens every now and then, then it is going to do very well. And fortunately, the world has many, many periodic events and instances that are quite useful. And then you have the clustering machines, and you have the generative machines that have been quite popular along the line. So what are the public policy challenges that emerge out of this? I think the challenge of transparency. The fact that these machines are not transparent. There are many types of artificial intelligence, but the main characteristics about all of them is that the more transparent they are, the less accurate they become, and vice versa. The more accurate they are, the less transparent they are. For example, fuzzy logic, which is another type of artificial intelligence, is actually much more transparent than a neural network, but it's not as accurate. Whereas a neural network is actually fairly accurate if you have enough data and computational power, an issue that I'm going to talk about, but it's not transparent. You can't really explain its decisions with all sorts of public policy implications. And this is just an example of why the transparency is actually quite difficult. This is a deep learning neural network, which is called a deep learning because it has multiple layers. And you can see, for you to be able to explain why a particular input, its impact on the output is actually quite complicated because they are interconnected. That is really what makes it a powerful tool. The interconnectedness actually leads to the loss of explainability, which is actually quite an important issue. But because it's a rich structure, and because it is a rich structure, it requires huge amounts of data to train. And the challenges of data is a public policy issue that we need to bear in mind. Towards the end, I will zoom into the issue of data and some of the policy suggestions that we have in that regard. And of course, again, this is an example of a convolution network. It's a complicated structure. Because it's complicated, it is computationally expensive to train. I mean, this is an example of a book that we wrote on using Hamiltonian Monte Carlo to try to deal with the issue of computation, And of course, the challenge of computation comes in multiple layers. When we were in Johannesburg, we used to have the problem of having enough computation to be able to do the work that we wanted to do. At first, we will go to Amazon and buy computational power. It's very, very expensive. And that is another digital divide that has emerged with regards to access to computational power. And the other way you could do, and fortunately in South Africa we have high performance computing facilities that actually seem to work. So, and then the other challenge of computation is the carbon footprint that computations actually leave in their wake. Just recently, Kave is our director of our institute here in Canada, wrote an article on crypto technologies and their impact on the environment and on the water utilization, because you almost always have to be cooling these things. That is why there are suggestions that some of the computational infrastructure must actually go to the ocean so that you don't have to have big refrigerators to cool these computations down. But of course, we do know that you are just shifting a problem. What will happen to the fish? What will happen to the marine ecosystem? Of course, this means that our solutions must be holistic, otherwise we are going to be lost. So this is a big issue. And I will talk about some of the policy issues, policy recommendations that flow out of that. And then, of course, this is generative adversarial networks. And of course, the pictures that you see there are people that never existed. This is actually fake data. And there are challenges of ethics. Not all fake data is actually bad. You know, if you generate data because you don't have ways of measuring the data, it's called synthetic data. That is good, but of course it's not as good as the real data that you measure. So there are always issues of ethics that we need to deal with. Now, there's been much written about the impact of AI, and I can divide the global opinion into two camps. The first one is that it is posing existential risk. The second one is to say that it actually gives us many important tools to be able to deal with problems that were either very expensive to deal with or problems that can be dealt with. So here is an example of the good that can come of AI. This is the work that we did with my student who is now at Queen Mary on COVID, just modeling the prediction of a peak of COVID. And it worked actually quite well. But out of this, we realized that when you deal with something as complex as COVID, your models become much more accurate if you have cross-border data. So the issue of reducing the friction of cross-border data flow becomes an important issue. And I will talk about a public policy recommendation in that regard. Now, this is a piece of technology that we developed in Johannesburg, where we were looking at how to restore a voice of somebody who has had their voice boxes surgically removed. And you do that by just monitoring the movement of the tongue and using neural networks to relate it to what the person wanted to say and use a voice synthesizer to create that voice. And you have many of these technologies that are emerging. I think the big issue, the big policy issue that we need to start worrying about is the challenge of access. Access to technology, access to data that you use to build these technologies, access to the IPs that are embedded in these technologies. And I will talk about some of the policy recommendations around this towards the conclusion of this study. And this is the work that I do feel quite passionate about, because this is the work that originated from a personal dilemma. When I was a much younger man with black hair, not white hair, I went to a bank to look for a loan to buy a house. And then they looked at me and they looked at the documents that they requested, and they said, yes, you do qualify. Go and buy the house. As I was rushing out, they said, but wait a minute. How about if you die? Who is going to pay the balance? I said, what do you mean? They say, you need to have a life insurance. And then they give me the forms. I fill the life insurance forms. And the life insurance says you have to go and take an HIV test. In South Africa, you had to take HIV test to get a life insurance during the peak of the pandemic. And of course, I went and took, and it came out well. I qualified for the life insurance. But this idea of forcing people to go and take HIV tests just did not sit very well in my mind. So what we decided was that we are going to build a model that is going to eliminate this traffic of people going to take HIV test. So we're going to take demographic characteristics of patients, of people, and we're going to use them to predict the HIV. And it will be a model that these companies have, and they won't force people to go and take HIV test. And we went and got data from the Department of Health. It turns out that, we later found out, that every pregnant woman, when they go to an antenatal clinic in South Africa, they take all sorts of demographic characteristics, where they live, their educational level, how much they earn, what is the age of the father of the unborn child, how many pregnancies, how many children are still alive, and so on and so forth. And we built this model, and it worked. It worked very, very perfectly. Now you don't have to take an HIV test. But when I rushed to the insurance company, very excited, they said, this is a very good thing. But what happens if a man presents themselves? Because antenatal database is actually taken from females, so it's a biased data set. That is the problem we never were able to solve. The best you can say is that when you go in there, they will ask something about your partner and use that information to the model. And of course, this is the challenge of, and the other challenge was the challenge of completeness of the data. There were just variables that are just missing. For example, income. It turns out that these patients were not comfortable putting how much they earn onto this. And the other variables that were coming into there, sometimes the age of the unborn child, especially if it is a single young child, it was missing. So the idea of missing data, and the only way you can deal with issues of missing data is to use fake data, or not fake data, synthetic data that you actually create for that purpose. This is a good use of missing data. And of course, ultimately we had a US patent in this that the insurance companies actually quite liked. Now I'm just going to move on the impact of AI into, I always go to this issue of economics. The whole economic theory has been based on the assumption that the principal decision maker is actually a human being. And of course, with the rise of AI and other technologies, I shouldn't just, I know that the popular press will always say AI, but I think it's much broader than that. Computational capabilities is another. The whole principal agent is no longer just a human being. In fact, at best, it's a human being plus a machine. And we have not really developed theories of economics that deal with that. And me and my student, Evan Hewitz, who was my PhD student then, who is now a Standard & Poor, we just went and investigated all these economic theories and how AI is going to influence that. We published this book in 2017. And of course, it is clear that the whole concept of information asymmetry becomes less if you have machines that can be able to reveal information that a human eye cannot be able to reveal. The whole concept of demand and supply is individualized. So the pricing is no longer just based on aggregate demand and aggregate supply, and all these issues. And I think the challenge of curriculum in this age is a policy issue that we need to take forward and deal with it so that we can have the curriculum that is ready to create a cohort of people and thinkers who are going to work in this environment. I always go to this other problem of monitoring of infrastructure. My first engineering teacher was actually my grandmother. My grandmother was a very wise woman, you know. And she used to make clay pots, you know, and making clay pots in a village is not as uncomplicated as it would be in an urban areas. I actually used to accompany her to the river to choose the appropriate clay to be able to do this. And she will come back with clay, and then she will form it into a pot without the aid of any computer-aided design software, and then she will put it in the sun, and she will put it in the furnace, and then after it is ready, she will knock each one of them and listen to it. And she says, if it rings for a long time, it's a good pot. If it rings for a short time, it's a bad pot. Of course, when you study mechanical engineering cover, you will remember this as a civil engineer. If it rings for a long time, it's a lightly damped structure. If it rings for a long time, it's a damped structure. It means that there must be some holes and voids inside. You know, it all makes sense now when I think about it. And she used to sell these pots. And as time goes on, she started throwing away good pots because her hearing was deteriorating. And of course, when I went to do a PhD, my PhD was using vibration data and neural networks to monitor the integrity of structures. It came straight out of my grandmother's playbook, you know. Unfortunately, she was not there when I completed, despite the fact that Bud actually says she died in 2019. I wish if she died in 2019 because I would have had a very fruitful 25 years with her, you know. So that is an example of a bridge that collapsed in Johannesburg. It's a temporary bridge, and you can be able to monitor this by listening to the vibration and taking that signal to an artificial intelligence infrastructure, and then of course you know, the issues of appropriate sensors, how available they are, and so on and so forth becomes a big issue. Now, everybody talks about post-truth. Complicated philosophical concept as far as I'm concerned. Many years ago, I think it was in 2007, this was an article in New Scientist. We created, it was me and Evan, we created a piece of software to play a game of poker. And of course, and then you sort of allow it to evolve to learn how to play the game of poker. And we actually started observing that it is learning how to bluff without necessarily being prompted or programmed to learn how to bluff. And by the way, this is not a conspiracy. If you go and read this article on New Scientist that was published in 2007, some people said our work was it's not possible that a piece of software can learn how to bluff. And of course, 15 years on, the issue of whether the systems that we are building can deceive, you know, sometimes it gets confused, and so on and so forth. So, and as this challenge of truth requires a policy instrument that we need to deal with. We live at a very dangerous times. We all have seen what is happening in the Middle East with deep concerns. Certainly the Secretary General has expressed. We all might not know that we have conflicts in the Sudan. And that is why many of the people from where I come from, they get very angry because they feel that their conflicts are ignored, you know. And they're becoming much more aggressive about it, and you can probably see the policy positions of many of the people who come from where I come from is at best ambivalent, because you have problems in the DRC, you have problems in Mozambique. We are also concerned about that. And we are concerned about the problems in Ukraine and so on and so forth. We need to create more peace rooms rather than war rooms. I think that is actually the philosophy that we need to take forward. But we have been working on using AI to predict interstate conflict. Many people say the majority of conflicts are actually intrastate, but here we're dealing with issues of interstate conflict. We wrote a book on it, which was translated into Mandarin, Chinese, simplified Chinese, in 2016, but the book was written in 2010. And of course, I think these tools, this has huge implications on those of you who are in political science. How do you teach people now, given the fact that some of the things that you used to use, norms and rules and theories of democratic peace to be able to tell whether the countries are going to go to war in an era where you have huge amounts of data and computation to be able to make sense of that data, and algorithms to be able to predict and understand some of these conflicts. Are these things actually coming to the classrooms? How do we reimagine education in that era? So those are quite important issues. Now I'm gonna go straight to the conclusion, because I've been speaking for too long. Dr. Madani already, who is my unofficial timer, has already said, you have spoken for too long. You know, it's not a one-way street. It has to be a dialogue. So I think I'm just going to talk about issues of ethics. I have seen many rules, regulations of AI. My conclusion is that they all look the same. Of course, when I say this to people who are about to release a document on the challenges of AI or the governance of AI, they don't like it. But they all look the same. They talk about privacy and surveillance. I don't even have to look at what was decided in the UK. There will be something about privacy. There will be something about discrimination. There will be something about the impact, job displacement, security, and so on and so forth. They all look the same. So now the question is, what are the missing parts? What are the missing parts? I mean, the Secretary General was right. The governance model is the missing part. And of course, and this is just to go on the latest book that we published, the mechanism. We need to design mechanism. We need to design mechanisms to be able to govern this. We need to, and what is the objective? If I were to use an optimization lexicology, I think the objective is to maximize the good of this technology, but at the same time to minimize the bad consequences of this technology. We need to create mechanisms to do that. And the second layer, we need to change behavior. Behavioral science now comes into the picture. How do we change the behavior of the designers of these things without necessarily being accused of social engineering, which is absolutely a very difficult thing to defend. Now, given all these things, what is happening at the United Nations? The World Health Organization has come up with AI guidelines in medicine. I was part of that. That was even before I joined the United Nations. I was still at University of Johannesburg. and it's good guidelines. Still has many, many elements that we see in all these guidelines. Secondly, UNESCO did also come up with the ethics of AI. Again, there is a lot of correlation of what the World Health Organization has recommended and what UNESCO has recommended. The International Telecommunication Union has come up with AI for good. And of course, the Secretary General has instituted the Scientific Advisory Board, where I am a member, and of course the High-Level Advisory Board on AI. And when he went to the Security Council, he said, and I quote, he will not be opposed to the establishment of an AI agency. And of course, the High-Level Advisory Board is going to come and deal with that issue and make a recommendation that is going to go into the Global Digital Compact, which is going to be part of the Summit of the Future that is going to happen next year in September. And I hope all of you are going to participate. And today when we were talking about this, all these things are happening, and we need the voice from universities, and we need to find a mechanism. We have to find effective mechanisms of getting those voices into those global policy spaces. Now, the United Nations University, where I am actually, the leader, couldn't be a spectator. We are, the research lead for the High-Level Advisory Board on AI, but there are a number of issues that needs to be untangled. I think the issue of data is very important that we need to untangle. I think the issues of computation is another big issue that we need to look at. In this regard, to improve the concept of access to data, we have actually issued 2 policy briefs. And one of them, we are turning them into a policy. We have an international body that is going to come up with a policy on the use of synthetic data. I will encourage you to read this policy brief. It's actually quite, it brings to the fore a topic that is almost completely ignored. The use of synthetic data that tends to be much more heightened in areas where data is not as much gathered as places where data is gathered. And then the second one is the issue of cross-border data. These are big issues. I always give an example that, I come from Johannesburg, and the files, I've actually lived in, this is my 4th country where I lived in. I grew up in South Africa. I was an undergrad in United States, and I was a graduate student in England, and now I live in Japan. So my medical records are actually spread in 4 different countries. So if you go to United States, these files of my medical records, I was there for 5 years. The 5th year as a visiting professor. If you go to England, there must be stacks and stacks of files. I was even admitted and spent a week at Addenbrooke Hospital in the United Kingdom. And then South Africa, I've lived in South Africa than anywhere else. They are distributed across hospitals all over the place. But there is no unified medical record of my history. And you would agree with me that my doctor in Japan today will benefit from having all these things. And part of the reason is because cross data is restricted. What we are saying is that there has to be certain amount of data that you should allow to flow. Data to do with climate must be allowed to flow, because if you don't allow it to flow, people are not going to have a complete picture to build accurate models to be able to make us understand and tackle the problem of climate change. The same with pandemic data. It goes without saying that if there is a pandemic in my village, Dutun, it's a beautiful village. You should visit it sometimes, you know. And we keep quiet about it, that we are all of us in danger. So you need to allow these things to flow. But these are complicated political problems because they are embedded. There's a political economy of this. There are economic interests that come into the picture. So these are very, very complex issues, and I don't really see much work in this regard from a research perspective, quite frankly. You know. And then I'm going to move on towards the end. Improving access to computation. And I'm going to deal with issues of semiconductors because I did actually issue a policy brief on semiconductors. At the high level, we know that there is a global fight over NVIDIA GPUs. You know, I'm not going to talk much about that. We do know that there are countries that are restricted from accessing that. And some of it, you know, and I'm not going to talk about the merit of that. But you do have application-specific semiconductors for health devices that we use to monitor our health and so on and so forth. Sometimes even associated with solar panels. Those you must make accessible. What are the policy framework that we need to pursue? I am not sure. And we will try to develop a policy. I mean, just to give you an example, if I were to talk about solar panels and the restrictions of IP, that has a direct consequence on access to solar technology. It goes without saying that solar technology is useless if only 10% of the population have access to it. You know, it becomes useful and have meaningful impact on the environment when 90% of the people now depend on it. So which means for us to proliferate or distribute access to this technology is actually an existential imperative. And of course, there are complicated issues around IP. There are complicated issues of distribution channels that spread across the world. As a person who comes from Africa, I always say that if you close that continent, there will not be production because we know that much of the raw materials come from there in many ways in an unethical way with very, very problematic pricing mechanisms. And I'm not even talking about the cost to the environment and the cost to human life. So, in conclusion, thank you very much.
Thanks very much for the presentation. We have about 20 minutes for questions, and there's a mobile mic. I don't know, you may want to come up. I was only asked to make sure I repeated any questions into the microphone for the benefit of people at home. One question, I guess, while we're thinking of questions that I would ask is about getting social science students more involved in this. And you have a incredible background in mechanical engineering, and I know colleagues in computer science work with these tools inside and out. And one of the questions that I've often wondered about is, in order to ensure that our social science students have the knowledge that they need to get a seat at the table, to talk about issues of governance, and to do so in a way where they're informed enough to be able to contribute, what kinds of skills and backgrounds do social science programs increasingly need to offer to prepare students to take advantage and to participate in these discussions?
Thank you very much. I mean, I think I will answer your question in two forms. The first one is the principles that we need to adopt, and then I will talk about some of the specific mechanisms that we can implement. I think the principle that we need to adopt is that we need to, first and foremost, make our education much more multidisciplinary. when I was a student not too far from here as an undergrad, and I transferred from University of Cape Town. And I arrived there and they said, you have to take 12 semesters of human and social science. I couldn't quite understand it, you know. And then I went and took 3 courses of acting. Alex, I was trained as an actor. So my absence in Hollywood has nothing to do with talent. Plenty of it. And then I took economics, 6 semesters of economics, and I took 2 semesters of psychology. And in AI now, you have an algorithm called reinforcement learning. And I always tell my engineering friends that I actually was taught reinforcement learning in a psychology class. For those of you who study psychology, you know about Pavlov and his dog's theory of reinforcement and so on and so forth. That is where it began. And it goes without saying that Mr. Sutton, who came up with, and he's from Canada, who came up with the algorithm of reinforcement learning, actually did not discover that concept. He just imported it from psychology to us. So the first principle of multidisciplinary education is actually quite important. The second one is the principle that those who are in human and social sciences actually need a certain level of science and technology literacy. And I will use the word literacy because literacy means we're not expecting them to know how to program in Python. We should not expect, but we should expect them to understand, to be literate, to be able to do that. And those who are in the science and technology subjects must be literate in human and social sciences. Just not too long ago, in fact, I left Japan 2 weeks ago, and 3 weeks ago I met the president of the university, Case Western Reserve University, where I did my undergrad in Tokyo, and I was invited to talk to him, and I asked, do you still have such a rich humanities and social sciences for engineers? And the answer was no, because the cost of education is so high that many of those things have been reduced so that people can at least be able to manage the cost. Very sad. I was very sad to hear that. Completely sad, you know. So, and now, what are some of the specific examples? When I was a vice chancellor of University of Johannesburg, we actually introduced an AI compulsory course for all the 50,000 students. I was not a popular guy at first, but now people are very, very happy because they thought it was going to be a much, much more technical. I was talking to the Chief Justice and he was telling me that he took the course and he even has a certificate to show for it, you know. And I think more and more I'm seeing many people in social sciences learning much more about technology, and I think we need to expand that and we need to formalize that into our curriculum. But I'm not seeing too many people in the technical subjects learning about humanities and social sciences, and we need to fix that, you know. Thank you.
So we have time for questions. Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, we have.
Oh, you repeat the questions, right?
We-
Chris, for those online?
I think it's best if we repeat them. Yes.
No, I have 3 points that I would like to. First, thank you for your presentation. My name is Akisa Baria. I'm coming from Tunisia. And so the first point that I wanted to stress is the question of values and ethics. Because I think we are going through, a crisis of values, and we see all over the world this problem. So it was good to hear about, this importance of ethics when we are talking about AI, because it's going to be one of the main issues that we are going to face. And so it's a question of how to make sure that with AI, important values and ethics are going to be respected. The second point is about the global south. We not going to lose the battle because of the, increasing gap between, the North and the South, and how to make sure that the Global South will be in the running course, and to make sure that we will keep on, being able to take on the challenges related to AI, and because the world is going to change dramatically with AI. And the last point was about the cross-border flow of data, because it's a question. We see, for example, with climate change, for example, a lot of people are talking about overall governance that is going to go beyond. And it is going with the IPCC. It's really something that is looking at things at another level. And with AI, we have to see how far we can go with, because how much we can keep on. The privacy. You are talking about your personal medical records that were spread, and there were no. Not one single, but when you put all things together, this is the problem with the big data. We are also losing our own, freedom. We have seen during the pandemic, how the governors, by imposing this question of, people staying at home and so on, we saw a lot of people losing their own, freedom and and we see a lot of control that is going to happen. So having all the data put together, I think in a way it's something advantageous. And if we put everything together, we are going to lose, the freedom, the privacy, and so on. So all these challenges, how are we going to deal with all these things, Because we are going in with a bit of unknown, and there are opportunities, but also big challenges, and we don't have a good understanding of all these challenges that we are going to face. Thank you.
And
That's 3 issues.
there's 3 issues. I'll repeat just for the people watching online. So values and ethics in AI, how to preserve them, how to ensure that the Global South is able to participate in the AI revolution, and data privacy issues and transferability across countries.
No, thank you very much. When I deal with issues of ethics, I would refer to what our Secretary General said at the AI Summit in England. Actually, he brought something that I never thought about. He said, principles, values, and ethics, not new. We know exactly what they are. And then he talked about the Declaration of Human Rights, the UN Charter, and so on and so forth. So we know what it is. We know the principles. We know them. The question is, how do we ensure that they're embedded? How do we ensure that they are embedded from the development of technology all the way to the utilization of technology? Of course, the Secretary General is much more worried about all these things, but also about the weaponization of these technologies. But when I talk about weaponization, I need to actually put it up front that AI is not a weapon. My mother thinks AI is a weapon because she is reading from Facebook and she's hearing about weaponization. Nuclear bomb is a weapon, and we should not lose sight of that. AI probably can help us design a missile that probably will be much more accurate in the deployment of that technology. Biological weapons. These old problems are still with us, and we need to tackle them, So education, at all levels. Our politicians who are going to make rules and regulations must become much more technically literate. And we saw a big company from one of our member states, I'm not mentioning the member state, going to some form of a parliament of that member state, and you could see the information asymmetry between the lawmakers and the makers of technologies, but we are expecting those lawmakers to make laws that make sense for us. Problems, and we need to fix that. And then when it comes to the issue of is the Global South, isn't it? I am from the Global South, and I was completely educated in the global north. It is clear that the questions that confront us require all of us to be able to come together and solve them. I give an example of the Democratic Republic of Congo. If they start cutting those trees, we are all in trouble. It's a significant carbon sink, you know. We don't pay for it, we just benefit from it. I'm not going to deal with fairness because there's fairness embedded in that whole system. The same goes with the Amazon. These are global public goods that are essential for our survival, and we need to invest in them. And then when it comes to the issue of cross-border, it is clear that sharing information that has direct impact on sustainable development goals is a good thing. But why aren't we sharing? One example is, one reason that is proposed is that there is security that we need to take into account, that if we allow data to flow freely, some spy webs and so on and so forth are going to come through. That's the first one. The second one, which people don't really talk much about, but we know that is the reason, economic competition. That if we share our data, you are going to be undermined economically and so on and so forth. And there's no incentive that is stronger than economic incentive. And we need to untangle that. I don't have the solution, but the world will need to find the solution. Thank you.
So my main job was to make sure we ended at 11 sharp. So we have about 4 minutes. If there's another short question. Tiba?
Thank you so much. My question is, what's the success rate of like AI-driven recommendations or even public like policies that have been implemented? What's like the success rate? What are like the results like? Is AI-driven like numbers-based policies being proven to be better than just like policies that are thought up by humans?
No, thank you very much for that actually difficult question. I will try to answer it.
Again, please repeat it for the folks online.
Oh, yeah, what is the success rate of AI driven policy making? By the way, I would say that it's not even AI. AI is just a tool. I would say data-driven policy making, because you have data and then you use AI to analyze that data to get there. So it's data-driven tools. I actually think data-driven policy making has been very, very successful. And I say this because, and I can say this, people used to think it is controversial, because I actually grew up in a world that was evolving from pre-modern to modern world. So I have seen, I have been taken to the man of medicines to tell me about how my future is going to look like. My grandmother did that when I was going to United States, and of course we know that data, not some supernatural things, is a better way of making decisions. Alex was telling me that North America is becoming much more superstitious now.
Well, they're certainly not listening to facts.
That sounds like superstition to me, So I think it has been a resounding success. But we have to understand that many of these tools give us recommendations. We still have to embed our values and principles in crafting policies, something that the tools are not going to be able to do that. You know, these are human issues of what you want to see and what you don't want to see in a society. So thank you very much. Where I come from, we'll say, Ndiaribuwa.
Thanks very much, Mr. Marwala. It's a very illuminating talk, and we're right on time, so and we'll have a chance to meet with some of the students and people attended here for the next 20 or 30 minutes. So that's great. Thanks again.
Thank you.